Talk Zone presents the Geek Speak Radio Show. Your top spot for everything entertainment and pop culture, including TV, movies, comics, casting news, and more.
Hello, here we are. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, this is what we talk about all the time. That's why it's called Geek Speak Radio Show. So again, welcome to it. Welcome to Monday. Yeah, speaking of emails, like I said last week, we are getting a lot of emails because we have done a lot of Star Wars days. And most of them, I gotta admit again, most of them were from Star Trek fans, from Trekkies. Yeah. Saying, what about Star Trek? All you do is Star Wars, because we did the Clone Wars event not too long ago. We talked just the Star Wars day the other day. Today, fine, I heard all you Star Trek fans, and just for today, we're going to do another Star Wars day. I got to tell a little backstory before we do get to the guest in a second. A little backstory on how I actually found this guest. You guys have heard the name Ben Burtt, right? Yeah. I'm sure our guest, Tony, he's heard the name. Ben Burtt is the guy who did all the sound effects for all the Star Wars movies, Indiana Jones, and the new Star Trek that just came out last year. There you go, Star Trek fans. There's a little something for you. Yeah. But he did the sounds for those. He just came out with a book called The Sounds of Star Wars. Yeah. I've been trying to get him on, and he's working on a movie. Can't tell you guys which one, but he's working on a movie right now, so he's a little bit busy right now. His publisher sent me a link to this book. It's called My Best Friend Is A Wookie, published by Adams Media. And I looked through it, and I actually contacted them and said, hey, let me get Tony Pacitti is his name, the author. Let me get Tony on and talk to him, because they sent me a copy of the book. Thank you for that. I read through it, and like literally by that whole night, I just sat down and read it. It is definitely a page turner. And what I found, Tony's a little bit younger than I am. He's closer to you guys' age, but what brought me together with Tony, not literally. But what brought me together is Star Wars, our love of Star Wars. Mm-hmm. I won't call it obsession, not quite yet, because that's also what I find really interesting about the book, is that towards the end, I'm kind of in the same boat that Tony's in. And what's that? Regarding Star Wars. Well, we're going to have to figure out later. No, let's have Tony himself tell you. So welcome to the Geek Speak Radio Show, first of all.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
No problem. One of the first things I wanted to ask you when I was reading through your book is, you mentioned in your book that your parents are Trekkies also. They like the Next Generation. They grew up on that. I myself, like I said, I'm a hybrid geek, because I actually excelled at sports. And I also love Star Wars and Star Trek. Now, what I wanted to ask you is, how come you didn't start liking Star Trek more than Star Wars?
Well, I mean, as I said, my parents were Trekkies, and it was sort of like growing up with two parents each from a different religious background, just dabbling in both. But Star Wars just grabbed me differently than Star Trek did. We all watched Next Generation every week as a family. Watched the first couple of seasons of Deep Space Nine. Was a big family event too. But my introduction to Star Wars is The Empire Strikes Back, and it just really just totally blew my mind more than Star Trek ever did. So I just fell in love with it. Again,
we're not saying that Star Trek is better than Star Wars. It's just...
Oh, yeah. No. I definitely, I can definitely, I really do, I love Star Trek too, but Star Wars is, like I said, it really struck a chord in me that Star Trek never quite did. Not to say that Star Trek isn't a lot of fun, but Star Wars just was my weapon of choice, I guess, growing up.
Yeah, that story is in the My Best Friend Is A Wookie. That's how it starts. His introduction to The Empire Strikes Back, which was on a videotape. What was it exactly about The Empire Strikes Back that connected with you?
It was just how that was the first time I remember seeing a movie where the good guys don't win. Nothing remotely good really happens to them. I mean, Luke finds out his dad's the most evil guy in the universe. Han gets captured and taken away right after Leia realizes she's in love with him. And as a kid I was a new kid in town and getting picked on, and just watching these heroes who typically in movies always succeed at the end, just be so defeated yet still have a little bit of hope that they'll be able to turn it around in the sequel. That really spoke to me. As a nerdy kid who was having a hard time making friends and making a go of it in a new town.
I haven't seen The Empire Strikes Back first. When you went back and started watching the rest of them, the original, A New Hope, I guess we call it now, and Return of the Jedi, how did you see Darth Vader knowing that was Luke's father?
It was still, he was still just as, it's such a evil, menacing presence. It was just interesting to see more of him doing in Empire, he's just so obsessed with getting to Luke. So in seeing him as the all-powerful, overseeing bad guy role in A New Hope was really neat. And just being introduced to all of them was really neat. I mean, watching Empire, I really had no idea who any of these people were. But, I mean, and Luke kind of, gets beat up by the Wampa right off the bat. So I was completely thrown for a loop. It was really fun to go back and watch, at the time where those characters came from. Obviously now there's 3 other movies to show where they, in fact, actually came from. But
because I come from the Star Wars generation, as we're called, because I was 4 years old when I first saw the first one in the movie theaters, and Empire Strikes Back, and I actually experienced the 3-year wait between finding out if Darth Vader really was or wasn't his father. Because back then we didn't have the internet like today, and we didn't have blogs and all that. We had a magazine I remember back then called Starlog magazine, which was pretty much what all the websites are today. But I guess it's kind of like the question that I asked you, but did the story have the same impact watching it out of order? I'll phrase it like that.
Oh yeah, totally. I don't feel like The Empire Strikes Back necessarily ruined anything, because A New Hope really works well as a standalone story. You almost see it as they made it knowing that if they could go back, if it worked and it's successful, they could make more. But they it was still such an unknown. I mean, it's weird to think now that there was ever a point in time where no one knew whether or not a Star Wars movie would be successful. So it seems like they got in, told their story, got out, and didn't leave it too open-ended. So it was really still just as fun to watch, knowing that the Death Star was destroyed. I mean, they tell you right the title crawl at the beginning of Empire. But it didn't really affect. It didn't take away from the magic of seeing it for the first time.
And we're talking to Tony Pacitti. He's the author of My Best Friend Is A Wookie, published by Adams Media. It's out in bookstores right now.
Geek Speak Radio Show will be right back. Government can't control everything without controlling the Geek Speak Radio Show on TalkZone.com.
And we're back on the Geek Speak Radio Show talking to Tony Pacitti, author of My Best Friend Is A Wookie, published by Adams Media, out in the stores right now. We have a link to it on GeekSpeakRadioshow.com. Amazon link, the Facebook fan page, everything is linked on there. You can go on and take a look at Tony, the book, read some excerpts from the book. And we are talking to Tony himself. So let's continue on. During the break, Romo, my co-host here, he was going crazy because I told you before, I emailed you, they haven't read the book yet. I've read it a couple of times over the weekend, but they haven't read it yet. But he's skimmed through it. He's getting ready to read it. What were you going crazy about? Go ahead.
I was going crazy because literally everything that you were talking about in the book, I've experienced myself. I love one of the scenes that you're talking about when you became friends or started hanging out with the metal kids.
Yeah.
That was the funniest thing. Go ahead.
So, it was weird. I mean, as that happened sort of after the prequels came out, and I started getting disillusioned with what was happening with Star Wars. And I sort of felt like I was losing a best friend, so I was trying to find a new group to fit in, and I started hanging out with kids who loved Korn, and I just didn't.
Thank you.
Oh, man, I couldn't even fake it. I tried so hard to pretend like I liked Korn for these people, and I just couldn't do it.
It's funny because I had the same friends, and they were called the Children of the Corn. There were a crew that loved Korn. I couldn't get into it. I was like, this is cream of the corn for me. No, I just literally, I just followed the Force. I was a floater, so I just wherever the Force took me, that's where I went. So I love the book, Tony. Great job.
Thanks, man.
Now, one of the things I like about your book is how it closely parallels your life, Tony. And what I mean by that is the Star Wars films, especially when the prequels came out, that was around a time when you moved to a new town and you were trying to fit in with new friends, and they weren't exactly what you thought they were. Just like on screen, the initial excitement, myself included, the initial excitement over, hey, a new Star Wars film, finally. But then it was The Phantom Menace. And, what came out of that, especially Jar Jar Binks and everything that came with it. Talk about how it was for you as far as, the disappointment that came with the prequels.
Right. Yeah. No. The timing was. I mean, when I started looking at, early on when I was writing the book, I wanted to write something a little more critical and objective about almost feeling like cheated out of getting a new Star Wars trilogy, even though we got one. And then I was looking at it, and yeah, Phantom Menace came out in the thick of junior high when my best friend was starting to just smoke a lot of weed and just become like hang out with all these like scary dudes, and it's like the timing of all of it was weird. It was just too personal, so that's why I sort of decided to make a memoir out of it. But yeah, it came at that really tough time going into high school, and it sort of forced me to face all this, like girls and girls were the big probably the hardest part to deal with in high school, but just forced me to deal with it without just running back home and curling up into the fetal position and watching Star Wars all afternoon.
Yeah, one thing that came to me while I was reading that section of the book is that, and you mentioned it also in the book, and if everybody remembers way back then in the late 90s when the prequels came, the special edition, the tagline was, for a whole generation, this is the only way you've seen Star Wars, and they showed you, the TIE fighters in the little TV that they had there, and then it comes out and say, now you can see it in the theaters. Really, if you think about it, that generation still hasn't, because when I got to see those movies, I didn't see the special edition. There wasn't no, like you put it, Tony, there wasn't a clam coming out of the Sarlacc pit. It was just the tentacles coming out. Yeah. So really, you still haven't seen it the way we saw it.
Yeah. It was kind of, that was the first time I really started second guessing where things were headed. It was Return of the Jedi that did it with the super computer animated song dance number in Jabba's palace, which and with like the weird like honeycombs mascot for no reason. It was jarring. But yeah, I looked up that commercial actually on YouTube while I was writing that part, and that commercial still sends chills up my spine. I still remember how excited I was getting to be able to see these movies on the big screen.
Yeah, to tell the truth, when those special editions came out, I wasn't that excited about it, because I happen to have some friends who actually work at ILM on the movies, and they didn't tell me exactly what was going to happen, but they gave me hints as to what was being added, and I had pretty much the same reactions you had. Is like, what? Why are you touching that? I mean, that's my childhood memory there. Why are you messing with it?
Right. Yeah. It's not like it's not like it was some throwaway B movie from the 60s where you could clearly tell there was a string holding the flying saucer up, or like you could see the zipper in the back of the monster's suit. I mean, it was Star Wars. I watched the old VHS tapes I have, and it still looks awesome. Return of the Jedi still looks better than movies are putting out now. It totally wasn't broke, and they didn't need to fix it.
You mentioned this in the book also, and one thing I really hate, and a lot of Star Wars fans that I talk to, they really hate, is the fact that at the end, Hayden Christensen is standing there. We hate that.
Yeah. I mean, it's tough because I've really sort of mellowed, and this book was really cathartic. I really got a lot of venom out of my system about the prequels, and it still bothers me. But I can almost get it. I don't want to punch anyone when they defend it now, but I still don't necessarily agree with it. I can agree to disagree and not resort to violence at this point.
The book doesn't really, it's kind of open-ended the way you ended. I'm not exactly sure, and I think you just kind of told me, but I'm not exactly sure where you stand now as far as Star Wars goes.
I still, it still means to me what it did when I was a kid, and that's sort of over the course of the book, without giving too much of the ending away. I sort of realized that the importance that they had to me as a kid, like that security blanket, that safe place that it allowed me to hide from bullies and from peer pressure and all this weird stuff in high school. It's still there, even though the movies have changed and the prequels have come out and sort of changed the reputation of the movies. I actually watched the prequels recently, and I still can't really get into episodes 1 and 2. And I found myself sort of enjoying Revenge of the Sith, which I'm terribly embarrassed to admit now in light of the book. I certainly did not like
really hated it. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, a lot of it is just like we were talking about earlier. The timing of the prequels release was bizarre. It just lined up with some pretty heavy moments in my life, and that was definitely tied much more into the release of these movies than I think people normally go into movies without the baggage I went into them with. So
Yes, and for me, from like I said, someone who actually, I was 4 years old when I saw the originals in the theaters. When the prequels came out, I actually went the opposite end of it. I liked episode 1, and I could admit it in public too. I actually liked episode 1. Episode 2 was kind of just there for me, but episode 3 I really, really liked. In fact, if people were to ask me to order them and order all 6 of them, my first 2 are always Empire Strikes Back and Revenge of the Sith, and then the rest follow after that.
Yeah, there's definitely again, like I was just so blinded by expectation and stuff that was going on in my life that I really didn't go into Revenge of the Sith very objectively. But watching it now, yeah, it works. A lot of it, I mean, the romance is still really kind of, it's like they're reading Hallmark cards to each other still, but the rest of it is really, it's really a lot more solid than I gave it credit for. And I feel the same way about episode 2. It just is sort of there, and I always felt like Phantom Menace, visually more than the other 2, felt like one of the old Star Wars movies, even if the story wasn't quite up to par, and Jar Jar was there to clown it up a bit, but because the CG wasn't as advanced as it eventually was with the other 2, it just felt like there was a much more classic aesthetic to it, even though it still just pales compared to Return of the Jedi and Empire.
Yeah, I remember when I saw Return of the Jedi in the theater, one thing I didn't like was the Ewoks. I didn't think they were annoying or anything, but I just figured, okay, that's just
one of my, I don't like that.
To sell teddy bears in the store. But looking back now, 2020 years, looking back now, I see that it was actually a precursor or getting us ready for Jar Jar Binks and everything else that came afterwards.
Yeah, no, totally. And again, I feel like if I wasn't as young as I was when I was introduced to the movies, I'd probably feel the same way about the Ewoks that I do about Jar Jar and the Gungans. I just have, again, that emotional attachment from when I was a kid. And I haven't seen the Ewok movies since I was like 8. I don't plan on it because I remember really liking them, and I'd rather hold on to that than to just sour up the memories of them.
Again, we're talking to Tony Pacitti. He's the author of My Best Friend Is A Wookie, published by Adams Media. It's out in stores right now. It's all linked up on GeekSpeakRadioShow.com. The Facebook fan page is there. The Amazon page, everything is on there. You can go ahead and go on there and take a look at some of the books. We're going to take another break. When we come back, we'll continue the conversation with Tony. Romo will get into it because he's really getting excited. He's actually reading the book as we do the interview here. Let me take a break, like I said, and when we come back, we'll continue the conversation with Tony.
Geek Speak Radio Show will be right back. You're listening to TalkZone.com, Internet Talk Radio. Let's get back to the Geek Speak Radio Show on TalkZone.com.
And we are back on the Geek Speak Radio Show, talking to Tony Pacitti, author of My Best Friend Is A Wookie, published by Adams Media. That's out in the stores right now. And like I said, it's all linked up on GeekSpeakRadioShow.com. The Facebook fan page, everything is on there. So we're talking, what else? Star Wars. Sorry, Star Trek fans. Don't worry. Little teaser. You guys have your day coming this Thursday. Now, Romo, what were you getting excited about over the break?
Mostly about how, about Ewoks.
Ewoks.
I mean, I couldn't stand Return of the Jedi. I mean, for me, stormtroopers getting beat up by teddy bears throwing rocks. I don't get it. Come on, guys, we have guns. We could win.
Yeah. Well, actually, I think that was kind of George Lucas's point that we rely so much on technology, but they get beat by sticks and rocks.
That's funny.
Yeah, they were defeated by the spirit to survive, I guess.
Yeah. And actually, you came up with a kind of interesting question for Tony.
Well, I wanted to know, Tony, what character do you most identify with?
Well, certainly for the original trilogy, I want to say Luke, because I have a bionic right hand. But no, it's definitely in The Empire Strikes Back, his struggles. Until he actually gets to Vader on Cloud City, his opponent is himself the whole time. And that's sort of, as I was writing this book, I realized that I wasn't doing myself any favors growing up. I was just so afraid of speaking out and trying to express myself that I just sort of berated myself more than anybody else actually did. So his own internal struggles to figure out who he is, what his role was, within the Force and all that. I found that, really easy to relate to. In the prequels, geez, I don't know. I'm not sure who I identify with most. I think if it came to a wartime scenario, I'd probably be more like Jar Jar than else. I'd probably just be tripping over myself and and then accidentally killing bad guys, but more often than not, probably just shooting my own friends in the back by accident. I don't know. I can't really. I'm gonna. Can I pass on that question? I haven't really thought about it, so I'm gonna have to skip that. Maybe a Nemoidian. Maybe I'd be one of those weird Nemoidian guys with the weird face things that just pilot the ships around.
That's a good one.
The what do you call it? The Charlie Chan affectation.
Oh yeah.
Most people identify with Luke or Han or a Jedi, the good guys basically. How about the villains? Do you identify with any of the villains, prequel or in the original series?
Boba Fett and Vader seem like easy ones. So I'll rule those out. I really liked Bad Lando, even though he was only around for maybe 20 minutes. But it's just he just came off as such a jerk and a terrible guy, and he's just in such a tough position that you can almost see why he. What are you going to do when Darth Vader and Boba Fett show up with a legion of stormtroopers at your door? You're going to turn your friend over. You're not going to say, I'm not.
And actually, I'm not going to give away too much, but in the book, you kind of have a friend like that in your group of friends, right? Lando.
Yeah, I do. Oh, crap. You totally threw me off. Now I'm trying to remember who you're talking about.
I think it was not Jason. What was the other one?
Jason David?
No, I forgot his name. No, I don't think it was Jason. From the, I think it was 7th or 8th grade is when you had him.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. No, there's definitely there's a kid, I believe he was one of Jason's friends who I hung around with, who was just, I called my friend, but I just hated every second of spending time with him. He was just such a jerk.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was constantly throwing me under the bus.
Damn, it seems like we are lost brothers at some point. I mean, I had the same experience as well. I could totally relate throughout that whole book, and even with that scene, that part of the book. I didn't understand why I was even with that kid in the first place. I mean, considering him a friend, why did you name it My Best Friend's a Wookie? I mean, was there something with Chewbacca that was it Chewbacca himself, or was it just that Star Wars?
Well, actually, that was
a semblance of Star Wars.
That was actually. I guess it just fit. It was kind of catchy. It sort of. I felt weird about it at first because I never really talk about how much I like Chewbacca or any of the Wookiees specifically in the book, but it just seemed to fit. My Best Friend is Star Wars sounds just kind of weird. It seemed to work.
I love the title. The title's catchy.
Yeah, exactly. It was just catchy, and it gets the idea across that. These movies meant more to me than just, they were more than just a couple hours of entertainment, and and it's sort of, even it sounds pathetic. I actually found on, I've become obsessed with Googling and looking for myself on Twitter, and someone who works at a library tweeted, saddest book title ever, and then My Best Friend Is A Wookie.
Wow.
Which was, I didn't know how to take that. I guess it is. It's kind of pathetic, but at the same time, it probably bummed me out more than I should have let it.
In case you're wondering, this is not a Cribs Notes version of Star Wars. Tony does actually get pretty personal, and especially in the middle section of the book. I mean, Star Wars is sort of in the background the way I read the book. It's kind of in the background, but it's mainly about, like the cover says, it's a memoir. It's about Tony's life growing up. And, well, not his life because he's still alive, but growing up at least. And the way the book begins is kind of like where I am right now, where you and your coworker take her. How old was he? His 7 or 8, 9-year-old son.
I think he was 9 or 10 at the time. It was a couple years ago when Clone Wars came out.
Yeah, the Clone Wars, the cartoon, the one in the movie theaters.
Yeah.
It was 2008, the year with all the big movies. It was a few weeks after Dark Knight, so it was kind of buried. For the first time, there wasn't big fanfare because of a Star Wars movie coming out. Now, my son, he was 5, I think, at the time. I had no excitement to see this thing at all. I really didn't. And I took him to see it, and when I started reading the book, I kind of went through the same feelings you did, which was I was sitting there, kind of holding on to the seats and like, okay, what am I about to see? And once it started, the most annoying character to me, like you, was what's her name, Ahsoka, Anakin's.
Ahsoka,
yeah, Padawan. And when I looked down, he was loving every single second of it. I was like, really? This is the future of Star Wars? So you kind of went through that yourself too, right?
Right, yeah. Again, I went to see it with a 10-year-old, and I was sort of sitting there, and I didn't like it. It wasn't doing it for me, and I looked over, and the kid is just on the edge of his seat, jaw on the floor the whole time. And then when we walked out, I asked him, I was like, so what'd you think? And like, without, matter of factly, he said that was a Star Wars movie. And I couldn't believe it, but at the same time, it was really the first time I actually got to think that, well, if I were 10, I would have eaten this up. It would have been the greatest thing ever. And actually, I've really enjoyed the series. I just feel like that movie, that story arc, just really highlighted all of Ahsoka's worst traits. She's a lot. She's not really that obnoxious in the show. But in that movie, man, she just got right under my skin. But again, this kid ate it up. He loved it. I think that's what I was sort of, wrestling with. I was in my early 20s. I was out of college. I had to start pretending to be an adult, but I still wanted some things that that as a kid I got out of things like movies. I was still putting a lot of pressure on movies to be more than just entertainment, and I sort of had to learn to let that go. And it was tough because again they were so important to me as a kid and served so much more of a purpose than just being a fun light show to watch. So and in movies in general too, there was a good stretch of 3 or 4 years where I just hated everything I went to the movies to see. I was the worst person to go to a movie with. No, I wasn't a talker, but we'd leave and we would see something that unanimously everyone on the planet loved. And my friends would all be talking about, how great that was. And I was like, it was okay. And I was just so miserable. I mean, walked away from, I think The Dark Knight was the first time in years I actually smiled during a movie. And of course it was when the Joker stabbed somebody in the eye with a pencil, which it wasn't pleasant at all, but I don't know. I guess it just tapped into that malevolence that the Joker shows so well that it sort of started to break my icy exterior.
Yeah, I noticed that actually because I went to see The Dark Knight in the theaters a few times. I noticed that everybody was laughing at stuff we should have been appalled by, and there was kind of everybody had a look on their face like, wait, should I be cheering and laughing at this? But how can you not? Because it was such an awesome performance.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's funny because my little sister cannot go to the movies with me at all. She even told me in my face, I'm never going to go to the movies with you ever again because I always talk. And then B, at the movie, I'm always negative and just that movie sucked, whatever. Or it could have been like, it's just funny because nothing nice comes out of my mouth after I go to a movie.
Yeah, no, my family has long given up on trying to talk about movies and TV with my sister will be like, I went and saw blah, blah, blah last night. And I'm like, here's why it's awful. And I wouldn't have even seen it yet. Wouldn't have even seen it, but I had an opinion. And I became such a snob for no real reason. And, yeah, so they've just given up. They don't want to talk about movies.
And nowadays, besides Star Wars, what else is it that you geek out about, or what do you really enjoy? Not just movies, but anything else that you enjoy. I'm really starting to, not now so much discovering, but the last few years, I mean, there's been some great television. Not even necessarily, super geeky stuff, but stuff like Mad Men and Breaking Bad, and then their reputations have me off the charts excited for The Walking Dead. I'm hoping between Frank Darabont and AMC hasn't done wrong with their TV shows yet the last couple of years. I'm really hoping that's going to be good. The Venture Brothers is consistently great. That's one of my favorites. And I've tried to get back into comics. It's been I sort of took a hiatus at college where I couldn't afford to keep buying my weekly stacks, but it's been tough to get back in. I always seem to jump into the middle of a story arc. At that point, it's tough to keep up, especially with all the tie-ins. But I try to keep abreast of what's going on in the world of Marvel and DC. Yeah, actually, I used to be into comics myself also, but it's actually kind of easy now because I went away also. Not when I was in college. I think it started before college. I think my senior year in high school, I started kind of getting away from the comic books. I used to read religiously the Spider-Man books, the Iron Man, all of those. Now, though, there's what they call the Ultimate Universe, and everything has kind of been, they call it retconning. Everything has started again. So it's kind of easy to jump back in without having to, play 15, 16 years of catch-up. So it's kind of easy with those universes.
Yeah, and I'm sort of burnt out on the big events back to back to back. I'd love to just read a really fun Spider-Man or Batman story, but it's just there's always these huge game-changing events happening all the time, and it's just sort of I'd like it to be just more adventure-based. Something like I did read the first couple issues of Astonishing Wolverine and Spider-Man recently, and that seemed really fun because it wasn't focused on these big continuity-changing events. It was just a classic superhero adventure story. And that's why I loved the Astonishing X-Men so much. It borrowed from some of the more recent continuity, but it was just a fun science fiction story with the X-Men, and it was a blast to read. Yeah,
and before I let you go, one last Star Wars-related question for you.
Sure.
Knowing how much you loved it, how much it meant to you, have you ever come across anyone from any of the movies, whether it George Lucas himself or any of the actors, anything in the convention, anything like that? Have you ever run across anybody?
Excuse me. I went to Celebration 5 in August down in Orlando, and actually the last day I was there, I decided I had to go back to the hotel to catch the bus to the airport, and I was just walking around and. Carrie Fisher was supposed to do some panel discussion, and she canceled it for whatever reason. And as I'm walking out, she walked right by me. And she, just her and some guy were just kind of walking around the convention floor, and it just slowly everybody. It was almost like some little blip in the force was attracting everybody's attention. Slowly, everybody just stopped talking, and everybody's head was turning, and then everybody started whispering things like, "Oh my God, there she is!" And they all just started closing in on her. And it was super. I just ran up and sort of stuck a copy of the book out really quick and said, "I'd be honored if you took this," and just ran away. I couldn't even handle it. Yeah, it was super cool. And just watching everybody just, oh my God, Princess Leia is right next to us. It was really cool.
Yeah, I actually got to see her and Luke Skywalker, Mark Hamill. They were both here at WonderCon, to the convention that happens here in San Francisco every year. So we got to. I didn't go up and talk to them or anything because, first of all, the line was forever. But, I lifted up my son and I said, that right there, that is Luke Skywalker. That is Princess Leia, not the Ahsokas and all the cartoons that you watched today.
That must be awesome, though. That's gonna, how old was your son when that happened?
He was 7. That was this year.
Oh, okay. So, yes, that's definitely... Oh man, that's a memory that's going to stick. If my dad had pointed out Princess Leia and Luke Skywalker in real life when I was 7, I probably just would have exploded. I don't think I would have been able to handle it.
Yeah, and that's the thing with my son is I don't belittle him for liking Clone Wars. I mean, he's like you and me. He can name all the background characters, tell me his backstory and where they come from, why they drive this ship or that ship, or what kind of blaster they have. The same way you and I were about the original story, he is with Clone Wars, and so are all his friends. So I don't belittle him with that at all.
Yeah, I mean, you can't. It's almost wrong to be like, you can't like these, because you got to think, if the prequels hadn't happened, I remember when I was introduced to Star Wars, and then until 5 years later, when the special editions came out, it was a Geek exclusive. If you didn't it was no one was into it, and now it's still huge, and kids still love it. And I mean, for better or worse, the prequels kept these movies alive for a whole new generation of kids to enjoy. So I mean, they might like Jar Jar, but eventually they're going to work their way to The Empire Strikes Back, and so that's great. I mean, it's awesome to see kids still. It's just great to see that these movies are still as relevant and important to kids as they were when I was a kid.
Yeah, these movies will definitely stand the test of time. The original movies, that is.
Oh yeah, totally.
Episode 1, I don't know, maybe.
Yeah, well, it's there. It's an interesting footnote in the history of the galaxy, I guess.
Yeah. So we're talking to Tony Pacitti, the author of My Best Friend Is A Wookie, published by Animus Media. Again, everything is on GeekSpeakRadioShow.com, the Facebook fan page. Everything is on there. You can order the book if you want. Take a look at some excerpts from the book. Tony, thanks a lot for coming on the show.
Thanks a lot for having me, guys. It was great.
No problem.
Yeah, no, if you ever come to San Francisco, get a hold of me, and maybe I'll try to get an exclusive tour of ILM for you, because like I said, I got a few friends there.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, that'd be great.
So, again, thanks a lot for coming on, and have a good one.
Take care.
That's Tony Pacitti. Again, his book is My Best Friend Is A Wookie, published by Adams Media. Facebook fan page, everything is linked up on GeekSpeakRadioshow.com.
Geek Speak Radio Show will be right back.